All right. Hello and welcome to this author talk with Nancy Lane, presented by Jackson County Library Services. We ask that you keep yourself muted while the program is going on. There will be opportunities to ask questions, and you can submit your questions by either typing them into the chat, which you can also find at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see it immediately, there should be a spot that says more with the three little dots. And if you click on that, the chat will pop up. Otherwise, you might see a chat icon, like a little bubble icon, and you can click on that. This program is being recorded. If you do not wish to appear in the recording, please keep your camera turned off. And now I'm going to share my screen really fast. So this is our JCLS homepage, jcls.org. Right now we have our summer reading program going on. I'm going to show you how to find more information about that. You click on menu, go to explore, and under collections, we have summer reading. Our theme this year is Readers Are Leaders. What traits are needed to be a good leader? How can you be a leader in your community, classroom, or at home? These are the questions we're asking people during our summer reading program this year. We have many great programs on these topics. For parents, we have programs on being your child's first teacher, their first leader, and how you can help build brain development through reading and story time. We also have programs on civics, how to be a good member of your community and how to be civically engaged. To find more about our upcoming programs, you would again go to menu and click on events. For summer reading, if you want to participate in the summer reading program, you can log your activity, such as reading or attending programs like today's, on beanstack.org. You can just click Get Started, and it will take you to Beanstack, where you can create an account if you haven't already, and join any of our current reading programs. And if you have not played around on our new site since it was updated, you can access our catalog from any page actually. And we have a new look and feel to our catalog. It is very easy to use. If you want to find the book by today's author, you can easily search Nancy Lane, and the book that we have is called Pretty Chrysanthemum and Other Stories. Today we are joined by local author Nancy Lane. Lane was born and raised in the Los Angeles area and graduated from UCLA. She worked in computers, aerospace, energy conservation, and education evaluation before retiring in 2012. After retirement, Lane took up creative writing. She moved to Southern Oregon in 2019 and published the collection of short stories, Pretty Chrysanthemum and Other Stories in 2020. Thank you, Nancy, for joining us today. I will hand it over to you and we will get started. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. I'm going to do a PowerPoint share. So let's get started with that. Okay, very good. Okay, as Carrie said, this is my author talk, and it's hosted by Jackson County Library Services. I want to mention the summer reading program theme, which is Readers Are Leaders, because we're going to talk about that during the presentation. Wanted to give you a little signpost of where we're going along the way. The agenda is first to talk about my book. Then I'm going to present 2 book trailers and do some short readings. I want to have a Q&A part before we go too far, because I'd like to talk with you. Then I'm going to do some more PowerPoint to show the connections of my book to Readers Are Leaders. I'm going to give you some thoughts about readers, writers, and quality writing. And I'm going to recommend books and then do some additional short readings. And at the end, we'll have time again for some question and answers. Okay, about my book, Pretty Chrysanthemum and Other Stories. The collection I call Mum for short, so I don't have to say the whole thing. It's a collection of 16 short stories. It's available at the Jackson County Library and Josephine Community Library branches, also at the publisher site, openbooks.com, and at Amazon. Okay, here's the table of contents. I wanted to point this out because one of my goals when I found I was first writing short stories and thought about a collection was I wanted to make sure that the stories were all different. No two were alike. So I really strive to have different types of characters and themes and situations. And I think the names, the titles that you see in the list of the contents will kind of give you an idea that it's a set of various stories, not any two alike. When I tell people that I've written short stories, they like to, the first thing that they ask is, well, what are they about? And since it's not genre fiction, it's not mystery or romance or Western, that's kind of a hard question to answer. So I decided to come up with categories of topics. And this is what I came up with. My stories, some of them are about family, parent-child relationships, dogs, grief, history, love, satire. They're overlapping because each story can be about one or more of these topics. And the title story, Pretty Chrysanthemum, is very much about family, parent-child relationships, and love. There are two stories that are about dogs, if you are dog lovers. There's two stories about grief. In one case, it's about a man who's recently widowed. And in a different story, it's about a woman who has become widowed. 5 of the stories have historical content. 2 of the stories are really tongue-in-cheek. There is one that's different from all the others, and it's a satire. I want to talk to you about where story ideas come from. And to do that, I want to present to you 2 quotes by famous authors. Write what you know is what Mark Twain said. And that makes me wonder, well, what do I know? What do people know? And the author of speculative fiction, Ursula Le Guin, gave a wonderful answer. Her quote is, "As for write what you know, I was regularly told this as a beginner. I think it's a very good rule and have always obeyed it. I write about imaginary countries, alien societies on other planets, dragons, wizards, the Napa Valley in 22002. I know these things. I know them better than anybody else possibly could. So it's my duty to testify about them." And what I love about this quote is that it expands greatly the idea of what we all know. We know our everyday lives. We know the world around us, but we also know all that imagination that we have. Everything that we can imagine is also what we know. I'd like to expand on it a little further with some insights in that what you know about everyday life and what you know from your experiences, you know a lot more than you think you know. I have found as a writer that if I'm thinking of something and I go back to an experience or a location or a time, I pull a thread and I bring up a lot of memories. And there's a lot stored in each of our brains, and you can access that, especially when you sit down to write. Another reason we know more than we think we do is because now we have the internet. And so you may think of something that you know, and maybe it's happened in the past, or maybe you remember a person, but you may forget some of the details. And a lot of these things you can look up on the internet. And so you have access to knowing a lot more than what you think you know. So where do my story ideas come from? I wanted to give you a little rundown on a few of the stories and how I came to think about them. For example, I had in mind a question: what's the best use of time? And I thought of that because in one of my jobs, I was working for a company that did education evaluation, and I became aware of a school district that was very rural and far flung. And the students would take this bus, and it was a long bus trip to get to school and a long bus trip back. In fact, the school district was in Utah, and this winding road that the school bus took dipped into Arizona and then back into Utah and through an Indian reservation. So I thought about what would these children do on the bus in all this time? And the first thing I thought of was that they would be reading. But then I thought more about it, and I thought to myself, in general, the best use of time, my answer, yours might be different. The best use of time is to teach somebody to read. And so I thought about the school bus driver, and I couldn't figure out the logistics of how he could teach them reading while he's driving the bus. But he came up with a solution. So you'd have to read the story to find out how he did that. I read an article, just happened to, on why there are so many Chinese restaurants in the United States. And I thought about that. It had to do with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And I got very interested in that whole immigration from China to Angel Island in San Francisco. So I wrote Year of the Pig. Starburger, my story about a dog, also included memories of a 1960s hamburger stand. And so I just pulled that out of my memory and included that in a scene in Starburger. I read a news article about a Portland neighborhood, and that caused me to think about a story that I entitled Hippies in a Jar. Now, I gave a author talk for Annie Bloom's books in Portland. It was a virtual presentation, and some of the people who zoomed in for that were from a book club in Queen Creek, Arizona, and a number of them had read the stories, and they were very surprised to find out that I wrote Year of the Pig before I wrote Pretty Chrysanthemum, the title story. And that is, as an author, you try to think of things about your characters and about their story that don't necessarily get into the story, but they help you with the current story that you're writing. And I got so interested and involved in the backstory for Year of the Pig that I turned around and wrote Pretty Chrysanthemum. Riley Redeployed is a story about a book, and it came. The idea came from a post on Facebook where there was a soldier who needed to have someone take care of his dog while he was on deployment. And so, and in fact, the dog in the post was named Riley, but I changed it. It was Riley was a Staffordshire Terrier, and it was female. I turned Riley into a male boxer and wrote a story about him. Okay, I'm going to change this share and do two book trailers. They're each about a minute long, so they're not long at all. So let me do a new share. Be good. Okay, so that was the first one, Looking for the Blue Man. And let's see if I can do it again for the other one. Okay. So I see a hand raised, Claire.
That was a reaction. It was an applause sign.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, now that we've seen the videos, I'd like to do some readings. So first I'm going to read from the title story, Pretty Chrysanthemum. Okay. Jing's and Leguk's new freedom with daily outside explorations replaced their days of hiding in the storeroom. On the street, with bag in hand, Jing stretched out his arm. Leguk looked in the bag. She giggled and pulled out bits of bread. She waited for Jing to show her something. He took bread pieces in his hand and threw them high. Squawking gulls swarmed above him and caught the prizes in flight. Leguk threw. Bits of bread dropped to the ground, enticing some gulls to sweep low and look, but not risk landing so close to humans. Jing pulled her away to give the gulls space. They swooped, landed, fought, and carried the bread away. Jing and Leguk took turns throwing bread skyward. They laughed, made funny faces, and imitated gull squawks. When the afternoon sun softened, Jing looked at the clock tower on the ferry building. Fog swept in from the bay. They turned and walked back to the restaurant. Each day as they strolled through Chinatown, passers-by stared at Leguk, but neither she nor Jing reacted to their stares. An acquaintance of Jing's, a worker in the shirt factory on Stockton Street, asked Jing about the girl. Jing introduced her as his sister, as he would introduce her to anyone who asked, although anyone who asked already knew the truth. In the mornings before his shift for the lunch trade, Jing taught Leguk. He showed her how to write Cantonese characters, recite numbers, and add and subtract. He told stories about China and sang songs with her. He translated for her words written by Oliver Wendell Holmes, to which she laughed because those words reflected a Western way of life unknown to her. Jing and Leguk needed little beyond their food and shelter, for which Jing didn't have to pay. Jing discovered his luck at Fantan. He wagered his few coins at the gambling houses above the general merchandise stores on Grant Avenue. If he won big, he bought something bright and new for Leguk. Jing took care of Leguk and paid for her freedom. He would not become a rich man, as some immigrants had, nor even save enough money to book passage back to China, as others had. But he and Leguk found treasure in each other. He, orphaned at age 12, and she, with no family she could remember, became each other's family, and not a paper family, but a family of the heart, two birds together in the eye of the storm. Okay, now I'd like to read to you from, let's see, 59, which is Looking for the Blue Man. On my first day in the Pico Union District, blocks west of downtown Los Angeles, and a 6-hour drive from my home in Phoenix, Arizona, I captured a cell phone image of the mural painted on the side of a 2-story apartment house at West 12th Street and South Union Avenue. I had read how the original mural from 1971 had been painted out by mistake and later restored, but never why the muralist painted Steve McQueen blue, or why the blue-eyed actor graced this Hispanic neighborhood. The museum-worthy portrait shared space with an occupied residence where tenants shot hoops in the adjacent parking lot and bought ice cream from pushcart vendors along the sidewalk. I rented a furnished apartment on West 11th Place and, with help from the landlord's grandchildren, transferred a few boxes of housewares, bedding, and have you seen posters and flyers from my car to what would serve as my search center. The blue Steve McQueen marked the trailhead of my search for my son, Chris. I would begin in the exact spot where the psychic had told me to start. By the second night in the apartment, sirens became part of the evening din, along with the whir of car tires on the asphalt driveway and loud voices permeating apartment walls. From dusk until after midnight, music blared, polkas rattling on with words unintelligible to me, except for the frequent mi corazón shouted over horns and accordions. I remembered a few words from high school Spanish class. Beautiful words with lots of vowels, but too few words to stitch together a sentence to speak or unravel one spoken to me. In the neighborhood of the blue Steve McQueen, few adults spoke English, but the children did. Okay, and I'll do one more short reading now, and this will be from The Bird on Silver Strand. Okay, and a little bit of background on this as we enter this scene. Sadie and Milton are children. Sadie is 11 years old and Milton is 10, and they visit each other once a year because her family, who is rich, drives up from Los Angeles to Hollywood by the Sea. And Milton lives in Oxnard, California, which is nearby. His father works at the sugar beet factory. The year is 1929, and this is in the early stages of the movie industry. So a lot of people come from Los Angeles to Hollywood by the Sea, and Sadie sees Milton every year when she goes to the beach, and he's looking for coins on the sand with a metal detector. So they're having a conversation in this scene. Milton starts. Do you like make-believe? We all pretend, Sadie says. Sometimes it's wishful thinking, sometimes it's lying, sometimes it's just a way of being nice. Like pretending to believe the Gloria Swanson imposter? Yes, we were both being nice. She thought she was making me happy by giving me the autograph. I wanted her to be happy believing I believed her. What about make-believe movies? Sadie smiles. Please, Milton seeks her opinions. When Gloria Swanson plays a strong woman on screen in her fine clothes, girls believe they can grow up to be somebody, not just a typist or a wife. So what do you want to be when you grow up, Milton says. I'm going to be a reporter. Do they let girls be reporters? They'll let me. What about you? What are you going to be? I'm going to be a pilot, a barnstormer. At first I wanted to be a wing walker. I saw them in newsreels. It's dangerous and daring, but my father says I'll get more jobs and make more money if I fly a plane, not just walk on its wings. I can get a job carrying mail or taking rich people wherever they want to go. Mr. Wang, the hat vendor, wheels his hat trees outside. Food vendors prop up awnings and a policeman begins his foot patrol. A few of the beach sleepers stir. I can't come to the Strand tomorrow morning. We'll be getting ready to go home. That makes me really sad, Sadie. Sadie pulls a wrapped taffy sucker from her pocket and hands it to Milton. I'm going to miss you. Next time I see you, you'll be taller and your hair will have sunstreaks from swimming in the ocean. I might be taller than you by next summer. I think you will be. You know, Milton, there's something I really love about you. What? Milton is stunned, she said, love. You are yourself. You don't pretend. I can always count on you being you. Sadie stands up and kisses Milton's forehead before turning to leave. A few steps away, she turns and waves. Milton waves back and watches her walk to the hotel and disappear through the lobby doors. The salty breeze picks up, ruffling Milton's hair and buffeting seagulls in flight. What a wonderful day to be 10 and in love. Milton wishes he had summoned the courage to kiss Sadie and ask her to be his first girlfriend. He missed his chance, but next year he'll be taller and bolder. Today he has a black eye and a taffy sucker his girlfriend-to-be gave him. Milton stretches out his arms and crosses Ocean Drive to run home for breakfast. He dips his arms, banking to the left, straightening and then banking to the right. He can visualize his Jenny biplane in the newsreel, theater audiences applauding his airborne feats. Today, he can make believe he's a pilot married to a girl reporter. It's the best day of Milton's life, even better than yesterday when he found a silver dollar on Silver Strand. Okay, at this point, I'd like to open it up for a first round of question and answer. So who's first?
I apologize. I didn't get a chance to reread the information from the invite about you. Did you self-publish this yourself? When did you do it?
Yeah, no, it's not self-published. I wanted to go through a traditional publisher, and I went to a small press. If you're interested in the different types of publishing, there's a wonderful chart that Jane Friedman puts out every year, and it talks about the publishing paths, and she has this chart with 6 columns, And starting from the left side of the chart to the right side of the chart, it goes from very formal big publishing houses down to publishing on social media. And so the column that my publisher fits in is the third column from the left. It's the small press, traditional type of publisher. It's Open Books Publishing. And they published it in June of 2020, which was a little bit unfortunate because that's the middle of the pandemic. So not the best time to launch a book. But I think this year is going to be better. As things open up, I'll be able to get around and talk to people about the book. And hopefully more and more people will read it.
Well, I sympathize about your book in the pandemic because my first book was published shortly before 9/11.
Oh.
And everything shut down. My tours were canceled, etc.
So I've got a question here in the chat. They said, thank you for those readings. How did you approach writing about people from other cultures?
Yes, it's like I mentioned, I got interested, for example, in the Chinese immigration just because I like Chinese food, and I saw this article about why there are so many in the United States. And when I started getting into the history that went along with the Chinese immigration experience, I just got hooked on it. And actually, I did more research for the title story, Pretty Chrysanthemum, than for any of the other stories. I do a little bit of research for every story that I write, but I read several books before I actually wrote Pretty Chrysanthemum because it was also very interesting to me.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Okay, if not, we'll continue and we'll have another, maybe you'll think of some other questions you'd like to ask at the end of this. I have a few more slides to go through.
Wonderful.
So I will start another share. If you can see this, readers are leaders. And I wanted to ask the question, how do stories promote leadership traits in readers? In other words, why is reading transformative? And since I was a process analyst for many years, I always think everything's a process to me. So everything has inputs and outputs, and something in the middle that's the process that transforms the inputs into the outputs. So in this process, we have a reader and an unread story as our inputs. The reading process occurs and the outputs are a leader and a story that has been read. So how does that happen? So my answer is it has to do with brain science, story plots, and story characters. Okay, brain science. What readers learn from story plots? There's a very good book called Wired for Story, The Writer's Guide to Using Brain Science to Hook Readers from the Very First Sentence. And in Lisa Cron's book, she says, story, as it turns out, was crucial to our evolution, more so than opposable thumbs. Stories is what enabled us to imagine what might happen in the future and so prepare for it. Recent breakthroughs in neuroscience reveal that our brain is hardwired to respond to story. Your brain, along with every other living organism, has one main goal: survival. We're wired to turn to story to teach us the way of the world. Okay, now how does Mum address that? Okay, plot examples from stories in Mum. In Wired for Stories, we learn that stories grab us when they allow us to experience how it would feel to navigate the plot. So my question to you to think about is, what would you do if you're stranded after being carjacked and you accept a ride from a motorist you suspect has kidnapped the child in his car? Okay, you can find out what the characters did in Amber Alert. What would you do if you adopt a dog and fall in love with him, but your spouse and others feel he should go to another family? Riley Redeployed would teach you what the characters did in that situation. What would you do if you must return to the old country to find your deported wife and leave your young son in America? And that's the situation in the title story, Pretty Chrysanthemum. Okay, what about characters? I mentioned characters have something to do with readers becoming leaders. Readers can decide to emulate favorite characters' leadership traits. And so how do we as authors tell the reader what the character, what his traits are, what his character is about? We tell them by showing what the character does, his actions, how he treats others, what he says and how he says it, what he says about himself, what others say about him, and his thoughts if he's a viewpoint character. So I have an example from let me go the other way. Okay, this is from the story Mr. Williams' School Bus. And Walter Williams is a humble bus driver who inspires the riders on his school bus. And we learn this because he's been accused of inappropriate behavior, and he's at a hearing where the hearing is being held in the school auditorium, and the school superintendent, the principal of the school, and Mr. Williams, Walter Williams, they're up on the stage during this hearing, and there are teachers and parents in the audience. And at toward the end of this hearing, the superintendent asks if any of the parents would like to speak. And several of them do, including Mrs. Johnson. And she's asked if she's permitted to speak to Walter Williams directly. And she's given permission, and this is what happens. Mrs. Johnson turned to Wally. My father once told me that praise embarrasses humble men. Walter, I respect your humility, but you must suffer my praise. I credit you alone for the amazing change in my daughter. Althea has gone from a girl to a young woman this year. Of course, she's been on a great trajectory as top student every year. This year, that trajectory skyrocketed. Althea used to tell me she wants to be a photojournalist so she can travel and meet important people. Now she tells me she wants to be a photojournalist so she can help people see beautiful places through her lens and learn about important events throughout the world. Althea sees herself as a world citizen now. You gave her the opportunity and inspiration to help others with her talents. Inspiring others is your special talent, Walter. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. So if you read Mr. Williams' School Bus, you'll find out what the school bus driver did to help the kids on his bus and also to help the parents and teachers. Okay, changing subjects a little bit, I want to talk about what readers want. And I compiled a list from interviews I saw with editors and publishers. And they tell us readers want stories that grab them from the first line, compel them to keep reading, reveal the main character's struggle early and show why they should care, have well-developed characters, don't feel like other stuff that's out there, are well-written, feature crisp prose, have realistic plots, deliver satisfying resolutions, engage their minds and emotions, and resonate. And I highlighted several I want to talk about a little bit. Readers want stories that grab them from the first line. This has quite an impact on the author because one of the first things the author has to decide about a story is where does it begin? And many times we think of beginning chronologically where the time begins during the story, or we think of having it start at a certain geographical location. But sometimes the first thought about where to start the story is not the most interesting. A lot of times there's information that the reader must know, but you don't want to give a information dump right at the beginning. You want to start with some action, something that will engage them immediately. So that desire of readers to have stories that grab them from the first line really put a challenge on us as authors to decide exactly where to start the story. Readers want stories that don't feel like other stuff that's out there. You've probably heard the idea that every story has been written before. There are no new stories. Every story has been written many times before. And that's probably true if you're looking at stories from above at 3,000 feet. But if you come down closer to the story, you'll find that the author has put a different slant on it, put different types of things together that were not ever in any story. So along with the quote about every story has been written before, there's a quote by someone in the publishing industry who agrees with that. They've all been written before, but not by you. Having realistic plots. You know, I read you a quote from Ursula Le Guin, and she wrote about wizards and all kinds of imaginary things. So how could that have a realistic plot? Well, it's realistic within the world that she's built. The author builds the world for you, and what happens in the plot has to match or fit in with the world that's that she's given you. And readers and publishers and editors don't like to have a plot where the protagonist has a number of problems, and at the end, all the problems are solved because he wakes up from a dream and everything's okay. So that's not realistic, and that's not satisfying. Readers want stories that engage their minds and emotion. I think that's the most important thing. Readers want to feel and to think. So that's what we have to deliver in stories that we write. Okay, I wanted to talk also about why writers write. In the class that I gave at Ollie, one of my students said he writes because he cannot not write. He just has to write. So that's what I put at the top. But I also have my own reasons. First of all, people love to do what they do well, and there are a lot of things I can't do at all. I admire the people who can do them, but I can write well, so that's why I enjoy writing. I love order. I like putting words down and moving them around until their order pleases me. I mentioned the research that I do. That's fun. It's fun to do research, to find out if karaoke existed in 1971, because that's when one of my stories was, and it did not exist in 71. It didn't come about until about 77 or 78. I wanted to find out, how long do boxer dogs live, and how do amateur video clips show up on TV news? Another reason I like to write is because it gives me the opportunity to hang out with other writers, and the writing community is very friendly and engaging. It's a very good community to be within. But the last two bullets, the last two items are what the most significant reasons I like to write. I love surprises, and even though I outline my stories, there comes a part when the characters come to life and they give me their surprises. And number 6 is what I call the joy of writing, those moments when I slip into the zone where words hurry to the page and the characters themselves whisper to me what they want to say. And one of my students agreed with that, has had that experience. So I'm not alone in feeling that. And I want to talk briefly about quality. Quality goes beyond just what readers want. It goes to the effect that quality writing has on the reader. So I'll read these, and you might think about what you consider to be quality within a story. I'm saying it's a story which tells the truth and gives the reader insight into who we are, a story which makes a promise to the reader and keeps it, a story which transports the reader into an unexpected set of circumstances and shows her how to navigate through it, a story that, having been read, changes the reader in some way, a story the reader will read again and maybe even several times and learn something more each time through. I highlighted 3 and 4 because those are related to what we're talking about readers being leaders. Number 5, I would just say, think about the classic stories that you've read over and over, or the ones that you've thought about through the years. Okay, I want to make some recommendations for you for your reading. Even if you're not looking to become a writer, or you're not a writer, I still recommend Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. Some Instructions on Writing on Life. It's a it's a humorous book, and it's a very enjoyable read. The next one, Writing Tools, 55 Essential Strategies for Every Writer, by Roy Peter Clark. That would be If You Are a Writer. It's a very good reference book, and what I really like about it is the index. A lot of times you have a reference book, but it's hard to find things, but the index is very good. I already talked about Wired for Story. I also recommend a couple novels by Oregon writers. Lily's Homefront by Hilary Teifer. That's a World War II story, a love story. And Mr. Wizard, a novel by Jeff Wallach. And that's a humorous story, very funny, but it also has underneath, it has a story about two brothers, and it's a very heartwarming story. Want to give you my contact information. I'd like to have you email me. Please write down my email address. If you'd like to receive my newsletter, please like my Facebook page, Nancy Lane Author. You can visit openbooks.com for information about me and about the book. And if you think of questions later, or, I just love to hear from you. You can drop me a note and tell me what you're reading or what you're writing. So please feel free to do so. Now, we have a few minutes, and we can either do a little more reading or questions and answers. So let me get rid of this share. Stop share. Okay, and find out if there are any questions, or could I do one more reading for you, a short one?
We do have one question in the chat. They ask, are you currently writing anything?
Okay, I'm not, I haven't committed to writing another collection or a novel, but I have written some stories this year. And I think because of my experience teaching at Ollie at SOU, when you teach, you learn. And I'm going to go back to the stories I've written most recently, stories that are outside or beyond my collection. I'm going to go back and look at rewriting those, because not only was I a process analyst, I was a quality specialist in part of my career. And I really am passionate about quality. So every story can be improved.
I don't know if this doesn't really qualify as a question, but that old hat about grabbing a reader from the very first sentence.
Yes.
I've always believed that, and but every couple of months I get Poets and Writers magazine, and they always have the page one where new and noteworthy books begin. And so I've always read them, and I've never been interested in any book based on the first sentence. Like, for example, I just grabbed this volume by accident. It says, this is the first sentence. Just remember, you can always. Another one was, you told me I talked in my sleep, and I'm totally asleep when when I'm reading those things. So it's more than that, but.
Right. Yeah. That's true. I think that some writers, they just go for something they think sounds like it's going to grab someone, and I think maybe we could go back to Anne Lamont's book, and she talks about how important it is to tell the truth. And sometimes you have the feeling, you may have the feeling that whoever wrote the story is not really telling a truth. I mean, fiction is made up, it's imaginary, but it does tell the truth. And I think that you can kind of feel if you're not getting it. And, then you put the story down and look for another one. Let me try this story start on you. This will be the last reading, and it's not even a full page. So this is from Amber Alert. The school bus stopped, red lights flashing in a San Diego, California suburb, and belched children with their books and backpacks from both front and rear exits. Some children sauntered toward the school building, and others dashed toward the playground. Parked across the street, Peter watched, eyes darting back and forth. The bigger kids hopped out the back. He looked for someone petite, a girl with long blonde hair he would cut with scissors he brought in a bag containing a dark wig and girls' size 12 clothing. Sweat beaded on his forehead, worrying him his penciled eyebrows might wash away. His heart pounded as burly boys and chubby girls disembarked. He hoped she would exit out the rear of the bus so the driver might not see him approach her. He glanced at his watch. 7:38 a.m. Per his instructions, the courier would deliver his letters between 1:30 and 2 o'clock to the sheriff's office and to the attorney's office, the attorney who had spewed lies in court 5 years earlier. With a 6-hour head start, Peter could drive far enough to remain unhindered through the weekend. 10-year-old Addison, the last child out, hugged her books against her red parka. Okay, I'm open for any further questions.
I just had a quick comment.
Okay.
Can you hear me? I absolutely loved that you feel that you're gifted with surprises in your writing. And I know that's true with art and any kind of art. And I enjoyed hearing from a writer.
Thank you, Mary. I know your gifts. I know that you do wonderful oil paintings and watercolors, and I admire people who not only write but do these other things that I can't do. But what you mentioned makes me think of Julia Cameron and The Artist's Way. And in her book, she talks about creativity. And so I think about that when I think about these things that happen, this zone that I get into when I write. And Mary, I appreciate that others who do these wonderful creative things probably also have that same feeling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Nancy, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it. I want to encourage everyone to keep looking for more exciting events coming up with JCLS. Any parting words, Nancy, before we wrap this up?
I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Carrie and Ross and Mary and Claire. It's always fun to talk about what I love doing, and I hope that you love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And with that, everyone go and enjoy the rest of this very, very hot afternoon. Drink plenty of water and stay in the shade when you can.
Will do.